This video is made possible by our generous supporters on Patreon. Check out patreon.com/NWR for all the details.
Hi there, my name is Willem and welcome to NWR's Gamescom report. I've spent all week at Gamescom trying to talk to developers, publishers, and even getting my hands on some awesome new games you can expect in the future. In this series, I'll take you along to interviews at the event. I hope you will enjoy these videos. You may have seen a new game announcement a few weeks back on the official Nintendo YouTube channel for a game called the Knightling. This indie game is developed by Twirlbound and published by Saber Interactive. You might be familiar with Twirlbound as they worked on the open-world action-adventure game called Pine. Pine on Switch was a bit of a mess when it released on the console, but Twirlbound went back to the game and did an entire overhaul to make it the version they wished it could be. Now they are working on another open-world action-adventure game that embraces a colorful setting with some creative character designs and a main weapon that doesn't get the spotlight too often. A shield. So I wanted to sit down with Matthijs van der Laar, head of Twirlbound, to talk about the game. Unfortunately, we could not find a place to sit, so we just stood in the hall during the Indie Arena booth opening party. A few impressions of the game can be found in the larger write-up over on Nintendo World Report. The link to that is down below, so please enjoy this short talk with Matthijs from Twirlbound. Alright, can you tell me who you are?
Yeah, my name is Matthijs. I'm the CEO and creative director at Twirlbound. We're a small Dutch indie game development studio. We make colorful open-world action-adventure games, so yeah, most of my days are just spent making games, and the other bit is a bit of business, I guess.
Really cool. And you originally started developing Pine, which released on Switch and other platforms as well. Pine on Switch was a bit of an interesting story, if I can recall correctly. What are some of the lessons that you learned before we want to talk about the Knightling? Like, what have you gained from Pine that you're now trying to implement in your...
I guess the main takeaway is that it's a really difficult platform to develop for, purely because of the hardware and just how it misaligns a little bit from the more next-gen consoles that we have. So we weren't super happy with how it launched originally, so we decided after launch and after our part of the game and the ports were done to just redo the Switch port and see if we can get some more out of it, if that makes sense. So yeah, we just learned how much additional and custom work you want to do if you really want a good Switch port. So that's something we're taking to the Knightling as well, just reserving enough time for it and yeah, just learning everything from all the open world stuff that we did on that one too.
Right. So you just revealed the announcement for the Knightling. It looks really stunning, really colorful. Can you tell me a bit about what your design goals are for the Knightling? Like, what kind of game does Twirlbound really want to make?
Yeah, we were aching to make a very playful open world game. So you should be able to pick up the controller and should instantly be fun. Just a toy of moving around and exploring the world. Because in a lot of these open world games, going from A to B is usually not that interesting. You're going between quests. Or you maybe have to get a mount to be a bit faster and then you're just mindlessly going around. So we were some of the core mechanics should be around that traversal and going from quest to quest. And that kind of led to this multifunctional tool, a shield that you use for everything. So for the traversal, for the combat, for throwing, for puzzling, etc. So some of the design pillars were this world should be so playful and should be a playground, across all aspects. So everything from the architecture to how the hills are flowing to where the enemies are placed. It feels good to just move around in that, using the toy of this platforming character, if you will, in an open world.
Yeah, and the original announcement trailer is very narrative heavy. It's a gorgeous trailer, but it has a lot of leanings toward what's going on in the world. Can you tell a little bit about the world of the Knightling?
Yeah, so it's set in a world that's really all about duty and purpose. So you play as this Knightling who's kind of anonymous, so you're always referenced as the Knightling as well. And they're the Knightling, or a squire, if you will, to a large knight, a legendary knight. And everyone in this world is just really bound to their purpose. So when people meet you and when you're trying to do quests, they just want to see your knight, basically. It's what are you doing here, So we play with that underdog vibe a little bit, You're trying to go around the world, help people, go further into the world, and find your knight eventually, because he goes missing. That's kind of the problem at the start of the game. And all he left you with is that legendary shield, and you're going to use it for everything to go through the world and reach further into the world, try to get clues about where you might have gone, and see if you can be, the best Knightling you can think of, because a good Knightling will always return to their master, right?
Exactly. And I think the shield is a core mechanic here. It must have been a lot of fun designing ideas that you can interact with as a shield.
Yeah.
Can you name some of the examples that you were thinking about? It's both a weapon, a traversal tool, it's all in one?
Yeah, exactly. Well, the shape of a shield already brought in some interesting thoughts. Like we started off prototyping just only shield combat, so like parrying and blocking, but it got a bit stale fast. So we thought, okay, we need to swing it around. So a heavy shield like that should have some sort of magical properties so that it feels very light in the hand of the Knightling. And that just, yeah, I don't know, one thing leads to the other, and the whole team was just, you know, throwing in creative ideas. So the main mode of transport, of course, is just sitting on the shield like a sled, going around. Then we were like, it has this cool outer rim on the shield, so if we make that a bit more mechanical, we can use that as sort of a motorizing thing for like a glider to pop out or like a propeller at some point. And it's like, there's a lot of cool mechanical things that you can do if you make it more of a magical machine than anything else. So yeah, blocking, parrying, everything is still there, and really leaning on the affordances of what it is to have a shield, but doing some more like quirky, weird stuff with that as well, yeah.
Yeah, and structurally it's open world, like how there's always a balance between open world exploration, the freedom, like the obvious example is something like Breath of the Wild, where your own expression is very central to how you traverse and explore. Yeah. Is that something you're also going for? Is it more a way to present more linear things? Like, can we expect dungeons? Is that something?
Yeah, it is a bit more semi-open than, for example, Pine as well. Pine was instantly like you could go anywhere from second one. Right. It has halted the progression a little bit, or like the design choices that we made. So right now you need to upgrade the shield to get like deeper into the world, but they're all like interconnected large areas that are designed like open worlds. And then the story does take you through some more linear parts as well, because that's something that we felt was a bit lacking in Pine 2. So we are like building some dungeon-like areas with a lot of puzzles and boss fights as well this time around, and just going through that in the main quest while exploring the open world around it.
Yeah. Can you tell me a bit about how your team was like put together? Because you're a small, fairly small studio, but you have like how many workers? 15 people. That's still pretty, you know, chunky for a game of this scope. I can see there's a large scope in there. How do you balance that with like, I think a lot of people, and I think our publication at the time said like Pine is very ambitious, but that's also kind of where it stumbles. What are some of the safeguards that you and the team put in place to make sure that it's manageable? Yeah. To create something this like this in depth, right?
Yeah. I think with Pine, like we were like praying to the gods that nothing would happen to us. Like we just had 7 people, all of them a completely different discipline, with no backup. Like that was just the whole team. So we knew like we needed a bit more on the bones, if you will. Like just have a few more people per department. Like divide the, you know, level design is not the same as game balancing. So not one game designer should be able to do both that well, right? So yeah, we just expanded the team a little bit to fill in some missing roles. But also just the way we built the game was a lot smarter, like focusing on just the right things, on that playfulness, having a few like core pillars that we go for, and Pine was trying to do all of it at the same time. So like the traversal and the combat were not as fleshed out as we would have liked. So now just flipping that around, like from the start we're having fun with this game, and then we're building out the more deeper systems, if you will, that we learned from Pine. That was a really good way to go, I think. Yeah, scaling up to 15 people from 7, it was really interesting. We did it very slowly, very diligently. Like we knew very specifically what types of people we needed, and also who would sort of fit into the team. But I also think like we have some example studios that we look up to, like Supergiant, you know, making Hades. That's a really good example. They have all the money in the world, but they decide to stay a bit smaller, like between like 17, 25-ish people. That's a vibe we could really like gel with, I guess. Like we think going much bigger, you will get a lot more management, and you will lose a lot of this sort of indie vibe of like all sitting together, coming up with creative ideas. I myself, I really like making stuff. I like writing for the games. I like doing UI or quest design. I would lose that a lot if we add more to the team, and a lot of people in the team felt the same. So like scaling up more would have been quite a change. I think you start dripping into like a very different culture. But this was manageable, this was really nice, and I think, going to 20 now would not be as scary as well. If anything, we just never want to explode to like 40 instantly, even though like with games like this, it's not uncommon to do that,
Yeah, and coming back to that shield that you mentioned, the controls and the way you move around and explore really sound to be like at the core of that experience. Was that also like a hefty load of the development, like fine-tuning that particular style that you're going for?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the original pitch was just a action-adventure game with only a shield. That was like as simple as it gets. So everything just pointing to that, right? Like you said, it's combat, it's traversal, it's narrative, everything is pointing to it. So then when you're trying to play with it, there's a lot of actions you can do with the shield, but it should all come from like the same sort of base. So like the blocking stance, that's a really good starting pose for also the shield throw. You know, we tried to do like controls design and just general game design around specifically this one tool and this sort of one core set that should make sense in your hands as well. So I think it worked out quite well if we're seeing it here today.
Yeah, what I really like is when you have the jump and then you have a little bit of slow-mo when you throw the shield to aim and everything. Like it feels really like complementing that. Can you tell us a little bit more about the world and its inhabitants, and particularly the design of the Knightling? Like you wear the shirt with the key art. It's really cool visual style. How was that design chosen? Were there certain inspirations that you took from?
Yeah, we wanted to make like a sort of fantasy medieval world, but really add some twist to it, so that it's not the same thing as you always see with knights and squires and all that. So one of the things that we figured was it's all happening on sort of a peninsula that it was once inhabited by these giant stone creatures, and the humans just kind of arrived in this land fleeing a terrible tragedy, and sort of being ashamed of having fled that tragedy, they started hiding their faces. So nobody's actually showing their face. And the masks that they wear are really representing the purpose that they have. So you see a lot of farmers, and they're obviously dressed like farmers. And Knightlings have a certain attire, of course, soldiers and guards as well. But you kind of have a lot of quirky character designs through this idea. And it really adds a little, I don't know, a little twist to the world that makes it its own. And it's like a bit more characteristic, I guess, than yet another fantasy world. Yeah.
I think like one of the reactions I read was like Viridi from Final Fantasy with
the
which
was actually a sort of surprising reference. I was like, yeah, of course. I didn't really think of that, but
really
yeah, hiding the faces also means that the eyes are a bit deeper, and like you can do a lot of expressions that we just animate through the eyes. It's a lot of fun to not have the whole face animated as well.
So are there other inspirations that inspired you to make the designs and the characters?
I think like we more looked at just traditional cultures like around the world more than like specific movies. We did a lot of like African cloth culture around like African tribes. They have really interesting uses of patterns, but also the way they use masks and scarves around their face to sometimes hide their face as well. Like those shapes were really interesting to us as well. So there weren't like a lot of specific movies or like games that we looked at, more like real world, as we do a lot actually at Twirlbound.
What is the road ahead going to look like for the Knightling? So you have a tentative 2025 release date and most platforms, if not all, including Switch. That sounds like quite a challenge. Are you able to manage it?
Yeah, it is quite a challenge. As we said, we learned a lot from Pine on Nintendo Switch, but also with our publisher, Saber Interactive. They're managing the port for us, and we're obviously working with them sort of in a co-dev way to make that Switch port shine.
Saber did a lot of Switch port for other major titles.
They have a lot of experience with like really big games on Switch as well. So that was also one of the reasons to go with Saber Interactive in the first place. We knew like this is a development powerhouse and they can really help us get even a challenging game like this on Switch. It's obviously going to look different from the other consoles, but we just want to preserve that fast-paced movement and like the faster platforming fun that you have everywhere. So yeah, it will still be a bit of a challenge, but the game is in a really good state. We're happy with the content that is there. There's a lot of cool questing, a lot of cool moments. So it's really, we're getting into the phase of bug fixing and stabilizing everything already. So it's feeling good.
There's also talks about Nintendo announcing the Switch 2 sometime in this fiscal year and probably releasing the next. Are you hoping to port it over to the Switch 2 as well when that launches?
I mean, it would be awesome. We have no idea what the plans are as of yet, so we're just hoping to hear something about it, and it would be a good fit. I think if you go as low as Switch, hardware-wise, anything in between should be possible. So we're excited to just follow what's coming up and yeah, see if the Knightling is a good fit for that.
I think that's most of my questions, so thank you so much for your time, and best of luck with the Knightling. It looks really cool.
Thank you very much.
This video was made possible by our generous supporters on Patreon. Did you know that Nintendo World Report is funded directly by fans like you? When you support Nintendo World Report on Patreon, you get immediate access to multiple exclusive podcasts every month, exclusive Discord channels, an early look at select content, and more, all for as little as $1 a month. Check out patreon.com/NWR for all the details.